Good evening, Rabbi Shulman.
Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. It's really great to have all of you with us this evening celebrating Shavuot. Our combined congregations of Congregation Beth Emek and Temple Beth Torah, as well as a lot of guests who are watching, logging in from all over the place. We're really glad that you joined us to celebrate this evening's service. We're going to share all of the text and all of the songs online. You'll be able to see everything in the slides. You can adjust the amount of person versus slide. There is a way to do that. You could kind of like grab the bar and slide the people over for more people, or you can have fewer people and see more of the slide. You can also adjust the amount of the slide that you can see. That is how big the text is. You just go up to the top and there's a setting for adjusting your view. Well, it is good to be together. Hine ma tovu manayim. Let's sing. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 I don't know how many years Congregation Beth Emek and Temple Beth Torah have been doing this joint Shavuot service, but it's been for a really long time. Before I got here, it's a great tradition. This evening, it's just a little more special. We're going to share this evening's service together, and at the end of the service, our Shavuot text study will be the text of Rabbi Avi Shulman's life in dialogue. Together, we're going to talk about his journey through the rabbinate. So there's something wonderful to look forward to. And of course, the evening service along with the reading of the Ten Commandments. Avi, over to you.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what Rabbi Milder just said, that it is a joy for our two congregations to be together as we have for many, many years. And for those who don't know, Larry and I have been friends and colleagues since we began our study together at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem many years ago. So looking forward to this special evening as we celebrate the festival of Shavuot. Now summer's prospect, the world ripening and growing softer, the promise of harvest fulfilled, the warming sun lies before us. Now the vision of Torah, the world at peace and growing gentler, the promise of goodness fulfilled, the loving heart lies open to the mind. We'd like to invite Sharon Cohn, who, knowing she's a longtime member of Beth Emek, but she's also dear to us here at Temple Beth Torah for being a teacher and a morah for so many years. So Sharon, please lead us in the lighting of the festival candles.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר shel yom.
Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of this festival.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, on ripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days. Lest my day today be as the one before, lest routine set my ways.
I invite you to rise for Baruch. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Baruch hu et Adonai hamivorach. Baruch Adonai hamivorach leolam vaed. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. You may be seated. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, You set the course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv haravim. We praise you, Eternal One, who brings on the evening.
Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol, all these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. And what could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. We praise you, Eternal One, who loves your people, Israel. We join in Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Pa'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibata bam v'shiftecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam lehu yadecha v'hayu letotafohu b'neinecha uchtatam amezuzo petecha uvisharecha Leman tizkeruhu vasitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim lelohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Amen. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nora tehilot osefele, Nora tehilot osefele, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Malchutecha ra'u v'anecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam ze'eliyanu ve'ameru ze'eliyanu ve'ameru Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Eternal God, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. We join in our prayer of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Rabbi Milder, I hope you're still with us.
Well, I just found out I was muted. God, I'm certain, was hearing my prayer, but you weren't. I understand that. We rise from the Amidah. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hadorah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot U'Mevi Gula Livnei V'neihem Lemad Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor L'Olam Adonai Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav L'Hoshia Morid Hatal Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechayei HaKol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishene afar, Micha mocha bal gevurot, Umidor melach, Melech memit umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'emana talachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelu chasela, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. You may be seated.
As we come to our English reading of the prayer that sanctifies this day, our God and God of our ancestors, be mindful of your people Israel and recall our merit for good and grace, and in loving kindness and compassion for life and peace on this festival of Shavuot. Feel free to respond after each of these blessings. This day, remember us for well-being. This day, bless us with your nearness. This day, help us to live a fuller life. Baruch atah Adonai, Mikadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. We praise you, Adonai, who sanctifies the house of Israel and the festivals. Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. Baruch atah Adonai, hamachazir shchinato letzion. We praise you, Eternal One, whose presence renews Zion.
God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world all around us, so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we give thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, u'lecha na'el lehodot. We praise you, Eternal One. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Ki atahu melech, melech adon. Ki atahu melech, adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Abcha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Avcha. 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 Shalom Rav al Yisrael Avcha.
Worship together is song and praise and prayer, but it's also so important for us to just take time and to sit quietly and to offer our own silent meditations and prayers from the heart. We conclude with these words. Yehiyu liratzon imrefi, behegyon libi lefanecha, Adonai tsuri v'goali. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. And so we will, in a moment, join together in our prayer for healing. I know it's our custom at Temple Beth Torah, and I imagine it's as well for friends at Congregation Beth Emek, that before we join in offering the Misha Berach, we enter into the chat the names of loved ones, of family and friends for whom we are praying for a strengthening of body, a strengthening of spirit, and also for those whom we may not know, but whom our hearts include in our prayers for a refuah shlema, a full and speedy recovery, as we join in Misha Berach.
Kor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Kor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You have enlightened this path with the wisdom of Torah, giving it to the Jewish people as our unique way. We praise you, merciful one, who gives Torah to the Jewish people.
As we continue our service Seder Kriyat Torah, we say, assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities to hear, to learn, to revere Adonai your God, to observe faithfully the words of this Torah, and let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere Adonai your God. We ask everyone to please rise. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, ha'olam omed, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, ha'olam omed. Allah Torah, Allah Avodah, Al Gemilut Hasadim. Allah Torah, Allah Avodah, Al Gemilut Hasadim. We join together. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah. Hallelujah.
So to offer a few words before we read this special portion that's always read in Reformed congregations and perhaps in other congregations on the festival of Shavuot, we read the Ten Commandments because Shavuot is the festival that commemorates and celebrates Zman Matan Torah, the giving of Torah, and particularly as it's recounted in the book of Exodus in chapter 20. And the specific portion there is the Ten Commandments. And for a long time, this is not a new insight on my part, but our sages have long said that if you look at the order of the Ten Commandments, you can see a certain division. That the first three commandments have to do with our relationship ben Adam lamakom, between human beings and God. The first commandment, I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. The second commandment, you shall not make any idols. Third commandment, you shall not take God's name in vain. Following come other commandments that speak about ben Adam lechavero, between ourselves and other people. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. You should not covet your neighbor's wife or possessions or anything that is of your neighbor's. Now notice that there is a commandment that I left out, the fifth commandment of kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, honor your father and mother. And so too also our sages have said that There's a reason why that fifth commandment, in a sense, serves as a pivot between our relationship to God and our relationship to one another. For our parents are our teachers, our first teachers, and indeed our most important teachers about how we relate to God, how we bear a faith and witness our faith as Jews, and how we are to relate to everyone else. And so the honoring your parents serve as a bridge between the earlier commandments to God and the later commandments between one another. But if you're really paying attention, you notice I also left out one other commandment, and that's the fourth commandment. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And for us, I think that the Sabbath, Shabbat, serves a similar position as the fifth commandment of honoring our parents. For Shabbat also is pivotal for our relationship to God and to all people. For if we truly observe Shabbat, we are doing and being like God. For in the story of creation in Genesis, it says that God created the world in 6 days, but as part of creation, you also must rest. You must renew. That God is our example of not rest in the sense of needing a schluff and going to bed and taking a nap or something. No, it's the renewing and restoring your soul by refraining from everything else we customarily do during the week. And so Shabbat teaches us to be like God. And how do we celebrate Shabbat? Do we do it in isolation? No. We enjoy delicious meals with family and with friends soon, God willing. We enjoy Shabbat and worship with others, with studying with others, and relaxing and recreating with others. It renews our soul. So not only does the fifth commandment serve as a pivot between our relationship to God and to one another, but so too Shabbat. And all 10 commandments become these primary words of instruction of how we can sanctify our lives and make our lives holy and be like God. Kedoshim, to you. You shall be holy, for I, Adonai, am holy. Rabbi Milder.
I know I'm supposed to unmute myself before I start talking. It was such brilliant wisdom that you all missed. I hate to repeat it. Oh, no, we're gonna do Torah in two different modes. We're gonna chant a little bit of it, and we're going to read and translate a little bit of it. So you get to hear Torah done in two different styles. But there's a tradition that all of the Jewish people were present at Sinai. We stood at the foot of Sinai when the 10 Commandments were spoken by God. And so when we read the 10 Commandments, it's customary for everybody to stand. And as soon as I recite the blessing over the reading of Torah, I will ask that you please stand. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamvarach leolam va'ed. Baruch Adonai hamvarach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. Amen. Please rise. Vayedaber Elohim et Kol advarim ha'ele lemor. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, אשר הוצאתיך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. לא יהיה לך אלוהים אחרים על פניי, לא תעשה לך פסל וכל תמונה אשר בשמיים ממעל, ואשר בארץ מתחת, ואשר במים מתחת לארץ. לא תשתחווה להם, ולא תעבדם, כי אנוכי אדוני אלוהיך אלקנה פוקד עוון אבות הבנים השלישים והרבעים לשונאי, ועושה חסד לאלפים לאוהבי ולשומרי מצוותי. לא תישא את שם אדוני אלוהיך לשווא, כי לא ינקה אדוני את אשר יישא את שמו לשווא.
Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. Remember the Sabbath day, Lekodsho, in order to sanctify it. Sheshet Yamim Tavo Vasita Chol Melatecha. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. The Yom HaShvi'i Shabbat L'Adonai. However, the 7th day is a Shabbat for Adonai Elohecha, your God. Lo Taseh Chol Melacha, Ata Uvincha Uvitecha, Avtecha v'amatecha v'hemdecha v'gercha asher bisharecha. And you shall not do any form of labor, you, your son, your daughter, your male slave or your female slave, or the beast or the stranger who dwells in your gate. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashemayim. For in 6 days God created the heavens, et ha'aretz, the earth, et hayam ve'et asher bam, and the sea and all that was within it. Vayanach b'yom hashvi'i, al kem berach Adonai et yom haShabbat v'yikadshehu. And therefore God rested on the 7th day and blessed it and sanctified it. Habed et avicha ve'et imecha, lema'an ya'arichun yamecha al ha'adama asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach. Honor your father and your mother, in order that your days upon the earth shall be long, for the land that I, Adonai your God, am giving to you. Lo tirtzach, you shall not murder. Lo tin'af, you shall not commit adultery. Lo tignov, you shall not steal. Lo ta'aneh b'reacha ed shaker, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Lo tachmod beit re'echa, lo tachmod eshet re'echa, va'avado, va'amato, v'shoro, v'chamaro, v'chol asher le're'echa. And you shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor shall you covet his wife or his friend or his servant or his female slave or male slave, his ox, his donkey, or all that is your neighbor's. We join in our concluding bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We're going to lift up the Torah so that you could see what we just read. We'll do our best. I hope that you'll be able to see the face of the Torah. And while we do that, we sing, V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Yai la lai 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 yai lai 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 Yai lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai lai. Lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai.
When Torah entered the world, freedom entered it. The whole Torah exists only to establish peace. Its highest teaching is love and kindness. What is hateful to you, do not do to any person. That is the whole Torah, and all the rest is commentary. Go and learn it, for those who study Torah are the true guardians of civilization. Let us learn in order to teach, and let us learn in order to do.
It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim b'v'tomcheha meushar. Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim b'v'tomcheha meushar. Shalom, 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 shalom. You may be seated. We've got some upcoming events to tell you about. Our congregational presidents are going to share announcements of their respective congregations. And I think we're going to start off with Ronnie Peterson at Temple Beth Torah, if I'm not mistaken. Ronnie, let's hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Milder. Tomorrow evening, there will be a Yizkor memorial service at 6 p.m. The link was sent today with a special notice to the congregation. Join Rabbi Shulman for Torah study next Sunday at 11 a.m. Save the date for a virtual women's health fair sponsored by the women of TBT and Hadassah on Sunday, May 23rd. An evite was sent. Contact Janice Fontino or Karen Bressler with any questions. Our religious school is collecting items for abode services during the month of May. The list of items needed is in the weekly message. Save the date. The annual congregational meeting is June 16th at 7 p.m. Please note that all links to the services and programs mentioned are listed in the weekly email. Join us next week for Shabbat on Friday, May 21st at 7:30 p.m. Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
And I think we're going over to Lisa
There we go.
Kama. Are you
Hello,
there, Lisa?
Chag Sameach.
There you are.
I'm Lisa Kama, president of Congregation Beth Emek. Thank you to both Rabbi Milder and Rabbi Shulman for leading us in worship this evening. And thank you to our tech team behind the scenes making this possible. Just a few announcements for us. It's that time of the year where we are collecting contributions to the Backpack Project. This is a project we've been doing for many, many years at Beth Emek, where we provide backpacks full of school supplies for underserved families in Livermore. We are collecting donations for the next month or two, so please submit your contributions through through the Beth Emek office. This Friday night is our family service at 7:30. We'll be honoring our teachers in our religious school and saying goodbye and thank you to Sandy Phillips, one of our teachers who's been with us for many, many, many years as she and her husband move out of the area. So please join us this Friday night. And finally, our annual meeting will be Sunday, June 6th at 10 o'clock a.m. A message was sent out to members this morning by email and will also be arriving in your mail. Thanks so much. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thanks, Lisa. In a moment, we'll come to our prayer of Aleinu, which is, there's a beautiful melody that Dan Nichols composed for this Aleinu, and Rabbi Milder shared with me that it's not familiar to members of Beth Emek. And we've been singing it for some time here at Temple Beth Torah. And even if you're not familiar, I hope the rhythm and the melody may enter for your prayer as well, as we rise for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gerula liotze bereshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzo, velo samhanu kimishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem. V'goro leinu kefo hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh Baruch Hu v'ne'ema v'haya Adonai l'melech al-kol ha'aretz v'yom hahu yihei Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei d'kudishah b'rechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechmata, da'amiran ba'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. We are about to close our service. You see the beautiful Shavuot display there. We're going to conclude our service with the priestly blessing, which just happens to be the parsha for this coming Shabbat as well. It's customary to bless the congregation on the three festivals, the three Chagim. And Rabbi Shulman and I will offer this blessing, after which we'll do a kiddush and motzi and have a moment to chat together before we go into our study session. Oh, you can be seated. Thank you. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless you and protect you.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May God bestow favor upon you and give you peace. Amen. So our festival Kiddush is somewhat different in melody and words from our Shabbat. But for those who know, please join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol aham v'romemanu mikol ashon v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ahava moadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason et yom chag HaShavuot hazeh zman matan torateinu mikra kodesh sechel etziat mitzrayim kivanu v'chata yotanhu v'kidashta mikol amim umoadei kodshecha b'simcha usason hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael Behazmanim. L'chaim.
I hope you have something to say motzi over, something to nosh on. You have a very cute little challah. It's adorable. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Amen.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Please unmute yourself. Say hello. Let's all talk to one another for a bit.
Hi, friends.
Sameach. Hag Sameach. I love when my two worlds come together.
Hag Sameach.
I see people I remember from like the Midrash board and years ago.
You can change the view over there.
It's hard to visit two temples.
Hello to everyone.
This is awesome.
That's a mayor, Jack.
Hag Sameach from New Jersey.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, Michelle.
Jersey in the house. Hag Sameach.
What part of Jersey? What exit?
Exit 9.
That's where I grew up. East Brunswick? Are you in East Brunswick?
Yes, we are.
Oh no way.
That's
lived
where
in
Marcy
East
and I grew
Brunswick.
up. I never actually got the right answer to that question. What are you doing in East Brunswick?
Who's talking?
It's Michelle having a wonderful visit with family.
Oh, that's nice. Rabbi Shulman, is your brother on? Is Jay? I thought I saw a Jay Shulman in the gallery here. Is that
Guys, yeah, they look alike.
There are three of us. All three of his brothers are here.
Oh yeah, there's David and
Marty. Look for Marty.
Marty.
So both rabbis are one of 4 boys.
Oh.
Is that true?
Yeah, that seems so. Jay's nodding yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Rabbi Milder, but
Yes.
Yeah, Rabbi Milder is.
Is that a requirement?
It goes back to the Middle Ages. The 4th child had to go into the rabbinate.
Is that what it said in the Haggadah about the children?
Well,
Well-
I got us some honey on our challah for the words of Torah to be sweet.
All right.
Oh, very nice.
It's nice. It's sorry that we can't all get together like we usually get to study. Rabbi, you got to turn off the sanctuary. Hear myself. But I'm glad we can all, Beth Emek and Beth Torah can still come together like this. And nobody has to move the chairs at the end.
I do remember having an awesome dairy meal at Congregation Beth Emek one year. I don't know who was in charge of putting it together, but it was a gorgeous and delicious meal.
Yeah, don't forget to have your cheesecake later.
I have some to share. I bought one at Trader Joe's this morning, and there's no way I can eat it myself. So anybody wants some, message me.
Is that the kind, Cheryl? Does it have different flavors in it?
No, it's just a plain one, but you could put on top whatever you like. It's in the frozen section at Trader Joe's.
Yum. Ice cream's good too.
Yeah.
I wish I lived closer.
Closer, yeah. Let's see what's going on. Where did I think it's kind of cool that the rabbis both took the Torah scroll out of the ark in their respective spaces, and they chanted, like both of them chanted from their respective scrolls, and both of them had their wives assist, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was nice. I like that.
I did too.
So Rabbi Milder read out of our Holocaust scroll. I noticed that. That one doesn't come out of the closet too often. Hi, Janet. You're muted, Janet. You got to push Larry's magic button.
We have a Holocaust survivor Torah as well at Beth Torah, but it's not usually read from because it's pretty
cumbersome.
Yeah.
I wish I
have to go. I have to go. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
I wish I could move my little squares around because I want to see the Shulman brothers all together.
You can move squares.
Can you?
Go drag them.
Sharon, I think that you missed the point. It's not that their respective wives helped them. They were helped by their family.
Ah, yes. Sorry, Janet.
Let's put this on.
That is bigger.
Turns out can't. Yeah, if you have a PC, you can.
No, it was working on the Mac. I can move the squares around. Thank you, Sharon. I didn't know that.
As a teacher, it's a trick we learned a while ago. You put all the troublemakers on one part of your screen.
Thank you, Sharon. I mean, I'm 15 months into Zooming, and that is new for me.
Teaching on Zoom, both myself and the kids, we have become, I was tech savvy before, but it's a whole nother level now.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm celebrating it.
Right, Robin, right, Cheryl. Right.
Sharon, also thank you for pointing out for anybody who didn't see it in the chat that double the rabbis means double the blessings.
That's right. Double the rabbi means double the blessing, right? Exactly. But that's also been a long-standing tradition of Beth Emek and Beth Torah, where one rabbi would give the Hebrew and the other one gave the English response to it. That back and forth through different rabbis has been in place a long time too.
I'm trying to see if I can see Rabbi Shulman, since I'm looking at gallery view. So, you know what? Can we spotlight the two of us? This is amazing. We have so many people here. It's just incredible. Thank you all for being here. Avi explained that we have a relationship that goes back now, not quite as long as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, but pretty darn close. Actually, now that I think about it, I guess it is. Yeah, we're all there? We started at the same year in rabbinical school, and students at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion all do their first year in Jerusalem, which is a crash course in Hebrew on all different levels of Hebrew, and brings together students now. It used to be just rabbis. Now it's rabbis and cantors and educators from all the campuses of Hebrew Union College. After you leave that first year in Jerusalem, you head back home to one of three campuses, New York, Cincinnati, or Los Angeles. I went to New York. Avi went to Los Angeles. And we actually were not in the same place again, probably until I moved to California. I don't know whether maybe there were a few occasions at various conventions where we got to see one another. In fact, that first year in Jerusalem, which is a very intense experience for students, really seriously intense, we became very quickly friends and hung out together with a number of students who all referred to ourselves as the Bearcats. Why? Well, for Birkat Hamazon, we were the Bearcats. Yeah. That was really silly. That's kind of freshman level humor, I think. Yeah. We talked about, ways that we could reflect on your career, Avi, which is really what you have done. Certainly at Temple Beth Torah is really wonderful. We came up with a few good dialogue questions. We decided, initially I was like, well, it should be an interview, like Larry King, Dan Rather, I don't know. We realized, it needed to be a dialogue. So we're going to have a dialogue, but we settled on things that would be really interesting, starting with some things that I thought would be cool to talk about, and then we bounce it around from there. So let me start off here with posing an initial question. And if you have follow-up questions that you would like to add, you are permitted to do so. We do not promise that we will answer them. But put them in the chat. Let's see them. We'll see where the dialogue goes. So, starting with the theme of Shavuot, we've all got our Mount Sinai's, a summit on our personal journeys. But Mount Sinai is not the journey's end. So I want to ask you, Avi, to reflect on what are some of the joys, the peaks that you have experienced along the way of your career.
Well, first, I want to say as I wrote in my message to Temple Beth Torah on Friday, I was really touched, Larry, that you came up with this idea. I also just want to share with everyone on the congregation that a Tikkun Leil Shavuot traditionally lasts all night and into the morning. And so because of that, I have so many stories to tell. I hope you have coffee nearby, because it'll take me at least till 3 a.m. to answer the first question, if that's okay. Oh, it's not okay. Okay, so I'll start differently. So peaks, I have to begin first by just saying family. It's the journey of the last 40 years. I have to begin by saying that this August, Eve and I will, thank God, be married 40 years. Talk about a journey of 40 years together. But the challenge for us, as you know, Eve is also a rabbi. And when we started out, we didn't have any role models of what two rabbis married to one another, how to navigate that journey. And so it's been an improvisation from the very beginning. But without question, the greatest blessing in our lives, our 3 children, Naomi, Carmi, and Rebecca, and Naomi's marriage to Ryan, and Carmi's upcoming marriage this fall to Janie. Those are without question the highest peaks. But professionally, every position I've been in has had its challenges, but also the joys. I mean, just the joy of being a rabbi. I really love being a rabbi and being part of people's lives. And yes, the births and the B'nai Mitzvah and the weddings, those are high points, and B'nai Mitzvah and confirmation and weddings, all great times. And being a rabbi in a community is so precious. Let me share just a few stories from different places that I've served. So my first position was as an assistant rabbi at Temple Israel in Dayton, Ohio. The senior rabbi, wonderful, wonderful man, Irving Bloom, left for his summer vacation July 1st, and I arrived. And sure enough, people started dying. There were 10 funerals in the first 2 weeks. And so, you know, you kind of earn your stripes as a rabbi. If you can handle that, my gosh, you can handle just about anything. But I had a wonderful 2 years and learned a lot from Irving. I was a Hillel rabbi. Not a lot of people know that. But I was a Hillel rabbi at the University of Colorado for 4 years, as well as the statewide director of Hillels in Colorado. That was fun. When you're a young rabbi, I think it's a great place to hang out, is with young college students. At Temple Sinai in Denver, I was their first associate rabbi. I started in 1990 and the congregation was 600 families. When I left 5 years later, there were 900 families. It was quite a growth experience. And during that time, a peak moment was the publication of my biography of Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath. For those who don't know, Eisendrath was president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations for 30 years. I was the first full-time rabbi at Congregation Bethel, a suburb of Houston. I see my dear friends Ralph and Carol Katz on this Zoom. Ralph is this amazing cantor, and Ralph and I enjoyed 12 years of leadership of that congregation. It was a wild ride, a young, growing congregation. And then I came here to Fremont in 2007, and I've enjoyed the greatest calm and kavod harav, the honor of a rabbi that I've experienced in any position. And to be part of a congregation that had gone through some trauma and to help them through that time. A high point had to be dedicating our sanctuary that you see behind me and our social hall. That was really amazing. And the most terrorizing thing I ever experienced as a rabbi was memorizing lines in our Purim spiel. I always thought that a Purim spiel means you read off a script, but I had to memorize because these Meshuggah people here at Temple Beth Torah think that it's like a community production, theater production. So memorizing lines had me terrorized, but it was a pleasure. That's my opening statement.
Avi, the first question in the chat is the question that we all get when we interview for a job. And it's like, I could have predicted this question, but we've all had to answer the question. We would like to know what made you go to rabbinical school in the first place.
So interestingly enough, I'm not going to give a short answer to that. And the reason why is I recently rediscovered my 10-page essay that I wrote as an application to how my journey from birth to the age of 23 applying to rabbinic school. So I plan to make that available soon, because to answer that in a short way is more complex than I'm able to do. So there.
I appreciate that. That's a really honorable answer. It's not an easy question, after all. And although it's easy to make jokes, it's not really easy to describe what leads one to want to become a rabbi. It is a pretty complex set of decisions and experiences. Well, let's talk about grumbling. The Israelites grumbled in the wilderness. So did Moses. So what have been some of the frustrations or regrets of being a rabbi?
I have an initial immediate response. And I know that at least 2 of my kids are in on this Zoom. And I hope they've heard me say this before, but I share it publicly now. When Eve and I and our 3 children arrived in the suburb of Houston, it's actually called Missouri City and Sugar Land in Fort Bend County. Eve and I made a decision before we even, I began, which is, would we go to B'nai Mitzvah parties or not? And we decided, first and foremost, you can't be inconsistent. People know if you go to some, you don't go to others, and it can cause a lot of tension. So Eve and I decided we would go to every single one. And we averaged 30 B'nai Mitzvah a year, which means 30 Saturday nights. Eve and I were out while our children were young. And we did that for 12 years. And I look back and think I missed out on a lot of time with my children. And that's my fault. That's on me. That's not anybody else's judgment. So would I choose to do otherwise? Looking back, I certainly would. There are other things. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I could really relate, but please.
Frustrations, congregations that resist change. You know, the old joke is over the ark, Da lifnei mi ata omed, know for whom you stand. And the joke, well known in rabbinic circles, is actually what it reads is, we've always done it this way. And so the resistance to making changes in worship, in music, in the way things run as a congregation, that can be frustrating. And I also own the fact that maybe I didn't push for change hard enough. But hopefully I've brought about, wherever I've been, some positive directions. And I'm going to express one other thing. I'm going to be retiring soon, so I can go out a little bit on a limb. I'm going to say the following. Meetings, board meetings, committee meetings can be really, really great and focused and get things done, but they also can veer off into all kinds of Narishkeit, areas that just aren't important. And frustrating sometimes to sit there and think, wow, why are we going this way? But knowing that that's the way it has to be, because after all, people are volunteering their time and their energy, their resources. I'm going to say, I'm paid to be a rabbi. Volunteers are not. And so the partnership that's so critical is one that I dearly appreciate the people who have given so much of themselves. But it can get frustrating sometimes. And I'm frustrated with myself in not being more proactive, especially when our students from Temple Beth Torah have gone off to college. I feel like I haven't done enough to stay in touch with them. And I feel like there's a whole generation, Generation X and millennials who are out there, that I haven't done enough to connect with them. So I want to own that as well. It's a frustration with myself. Larry, I want to turn it back to you, since this is a dialogue. If you have anything you want to share in anything.
I've often, about the middle point that you made, I've often thought that rabbis are in a peculiar position of sometimes being, rather than the guardians of tradition, the catalyst for change in communities that love who they are and what they do. Congregations that have a tremendous devotion to what they've created, and rabbis imagining we've got a vision, and being prophets, and often there's a tension there, and there is no right or wrong. it's communities that have grown and developed and found their métier, and rabbis saying, but we could do, I actually think that a lot of rabbis experience that very particular tension of wanting to be change agents in communities that would rather really hold on to what they've created. They cherish what they've created.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And the recognition that I came here in 2007, there were rabbis before me. And as we all know, there'll be another rabbi, Rabbi Zoe McCune, who will come here and serve as rabbi of Temple Beth Torah July 1st. And so there's a wholeness to the congregation of which you hope to be a part and lead, but it's not forever.
There is a really fun question that came up in the chat. Do you plan on writing another book, maybe about Martin Buber?
Felix, I appreciate the question. Perhaps I'll have more time to delve into Buber, who is one of, as Felix knows, and certainly Larry, you've studied carefully as well. Certainly one of my greatest intellectual influences. We'll see.
I got it. You and I, we'll do it. Okay.
How about I and thou?
Yeah. So you were ordained in 1984. It's been more than 40 years since you began your studies to become a rabbi. What changes have you seen in Reform Judaism or among Reform Jews over the course? That's a significant amount of time. What are the changes that you have seen among Reform Jews or in Reform Judaism in general?
It's a great question. And whatever I say won't begin to cover everything. But to me, the most primary change is the rise of women in Reform Judaism. The first female rabbi we know, Sally Priesand, was ordained nearly 50 years ago. It'll be 50 years next year. Eve was ordained 14 years later in 1986. She was among the first 100 women ordained a Reform rabbi. When we moved to Colorado and after her ordination in 1986, Eve was the first female rabbi in Colorado. And when there's no precedent, it's a tough go. It's a very tough go. Today, it's a very different landscape with women rabbis. I don't know the exact number, but certainly in rabbinic school, it's certainly at least 50% of the class, if not more. And of course, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women have been ordained since 1986. We see women rising to positions of leadership in congregations and on a national level as presidents of congregations, of course. But I also will say in terms of liturgy, the profound impact of Jewish feminist thought on our prayers, on moving from a gendered language about God exclusively in masculine terms, and now that is simply not the case in terms of Reform liturgy. So profound changes in our prayer. But I don't want to suggest that everything is wonderful and everything regarding women and Reform Judaism is resolved. Certainly, there are many, many, many issues that still need to be addressed. There are two other areas I want to make note of. Secondly, would be the acceptance of LGBTQ, of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, however else you want to go down the alphabet. I'll tell you a true story. 1990, my first year as an associate rabbi at Temple Sinai in Denver, Rabbi Zwerin gave the high holiday sermons and I was given the Yom Kippur morning sermon slot. And I gave a sermon as the new associate rabbi about the reason why men and women who are gay and lesbians should be ordained as Reformed rabbis. That was 31 years ago. After I gave that sermon, there was a firestorm of controversy over who I was and what was I saying and gay rights. And there were those who were saying, yay. And there were those who were like appalled to hear that. I will only say, obviously, the kind of controversy of 30 years ago has subsided, if not disappeared. And the inclusion of many different Jews of different orientations, as well, and importantly, Jews of color, still work to be done, but we're moving in the right direction. And lastly, I just want to identify the changes in Reform Judaism. The Reform Judaism that I knew in the 50s and 60s was all about social action. That was the sine qua non of being a Reformed Jew. Civil rights, against the Vietnam War. But then that changed. The focus became on outreach to interfaith couples and how to address that. And by the 1990s, a turning inward of greater focus on spirituality. And that has continued, I think, into this century of balancing the inner life and the external life and reaching a greater striving for balance in that area. Larry, again, I'd like to turn it back to you and see what you have to say about changes.
You know, you talk about social action being the sine qua non of Reform Judaism, then it's interesting, with all of the appreciation for the place of spirituality, it certainly is not to, it takes nothing away from the commitment of the movement towards social action. If anything, I actually see social action occupying a more central place in Reform Judaism than it ever has. I really believe that it is now the thing that makes the Reform movement so clearly distinguished from any other movement. But the transition that you're talking about, there's a step in between that I know I went through, you probably did too, which was that in the very early 70s, I was deeply involved in the Soviet Jewry movement. And it took all that sense of activism and asked the question, well, what are the issues for us as Jews that require our activism, that are issues of justice and you know, that we really need to step up to the plate and do something about. And Soviet Jewry occupied my attention for, I mean, such a long time. Thankfully, the crisis of Soviet Jewry isn't there now. There are other issues, and there's anti-Semitism, but the crisis that existed then that we devoted ourselves to, I think, has passed. But for me, that was a formative piece of my growing into being a Jewish adult.
I really, really appreciate you sharing that, and you're 100% and very valid point. And I would only note that I think that the effects of the Six-Day War, 1967, the possible, annihilation of Israel and all, was an awakening for American Jewry and a sense of greater pride and identity, but also of identity with Jews around the world. And so the Soviet Jewry, especially, you're right, and in the 70s and into the 80s was so central. You're perfectly right.
We have a great question from Jonathan. I'm going to save it. Okay, I'm going to hold on to it because it's a good question for us to end on. We've all evolved in our Jewish practices. Everybody evolves. It's unlikely that you start and end in the same place in terms of what you do Jewishly. I know I've changed my own personal practices over my my life as a rabbi, and I'm curious whether your Jewish practices have changed over the course of your rabbinate, things that you took on or things that you changed, gave up or changed your opinions about. You know, I'll give you an example. When we were together in Jerusalem, you know, I grew up in a classical Reformed congregation. Nobody wore a tallit. I didn't grow up that way. Going to rabbinical school didn't change my mind about who I was. I didn't wear a tallit in rabbinical school in Jerusalem, at least, and I noticed that a lot of my classmates did, but that wasn't because they grew up wearing one. It was because they felt like they were going to be a rabbi and they ought to wear a tallit. And I said, no, I'm very happy with who I am. I'm comfortable in my skin as a Jew, and I didn't change my mind until much, much later, after I was already working as a rabbi, and at that point began to explore dimensions of ritual observance that I had never allowed myself the freedom to explore, because I was so set on my sense that, well, it's, the way I am is just fine. No, I actually needed to open up a little bit. I needed to have the freedom to experiment. Did you go through some changes in your personal practice, in your observance, your ritual, or maybe things that you changed your opinion about?
So your story about the tallit sparks a memory that actually precedes being a rabbi. But I'll tell the story, and my brothers are on this Zoom, so they know this is emes. This is the real deal. So I went to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem as a junior in college, and I became Orthodox in practice. I gone all the way from Reform to at least orthoprax. Orthodox in practice, not necessarily philosophically. And among other things, if you want to really stand out, or I should say, differentiate yourself in a Reformed family, and proudly so, growing up at Temple Israel in Long Beach here in California, I wouldn't eat my mother's cooking in her own home. I brought my own dishes. I cooked my own food, ate at the table, but it was separate. I also went to one Reformed service, and Rabbi Kelter was taking the Torah out. I was the only one wearing a tallit. He had a rabbinic stole. And when I reached to touch the Torah, as we custom, he froze. It had been decades since a Jew had done that in a congregation of his. So yeah, but I swung back over time. In brief, two key areas that have changed since I've been a rabbi. And to tell the story, I was in my late 40s. I had been a rabbi for nearly 20 years, and I was burned out. Burnout is a real occupational hazard for clergy, not just rabbis, clergy. I had not had a sabbatical. I had had no break from being a rabbi. And fortunately, I saw a possibility, and I joined a cohort of 30 rabbis of different denominations participating in the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. And if you're not familiar, you can just Google Institute for Jewish Spirituality. And over the course of 18 months, I reacquired certain practices of meditation, yoga, study of Hasidic texts, spiritual direction, and reconnecting to my soul, essentially. And it saved me. It absolutely saved me. And I've carried some of those practices in going forward. And for those who have ever been part of a Shabbat HaNefesh service here at Temple, that's reflective of that training. Going the other direction, the most significant change in my rabbinate, when I was ordained in 1984, there were 24 of us, many of them friends of yours, Larry, of course, like Jim Bennett and other friends in Cincinnati. We did a poll, Half of us said we would officiate in an intermarriage, and half of us said we wouldn't. I was resolutely in the camp that said we would under no circumstances. During my years in Houston, I started to reconsider that position. Not because of any external factor, not because of any external pressure, but I came to kind of think about, is that really what I want to stand for? And is that really the best practice? I never made that change in Houston because I knew I'd be leaving. And as I came to that time, it became a way of coming to California. I'd already reached a point that was 180 from where I started. But it was an internal process, which I won't go into detail, but I felt very strong about where I was. And so that was a very significant change for me. How about for you?
It's wonderful to hear you talk about that. During that Orthodox kind of stint, did you have payas?
No, but I've been invited to be a guest actor on Shtisel, and I just, maybe after I retire, I'll have one.
Did you go to Bratslaver's yeshiva? Did you check it out?
Everyone goes to Bratslaver sooner or later. Come on.
I would not go. I absolutely. It's a yeshiva for the more liberal-minded, hippie background type folks go to Bratslaver's in Jerusalem. No, I never went.
You mean the ones who wear Jerry Garcia ties?
Yeah, Jerry Garcia ties. Well, yeah. Rena asks a really interesting follow-up question. She asked, did any of our B'nai Mitzvah students go on to be rabbis or other Jewish professionals? Any of yours?
First, and I want to be the first to acknowledge that I had no part of Stacy Peterson becoming a rabbi other than helping write a recommendation letter. But more importantly, it's certainly she is a proudly representative of Temple Beth Torah, Rabbi Peterson. There are students of mine from Denver as well as Boulder who have gone on to become rabbis, who our paths have crossed. Some of them I helped mentor into the rabbinate. And so that's been something of deep pleasure for me. Yeah.
One of my students is at HUC right now, but one of my B'nai Mitzvah students is at HUC right now, but actually more of my students who were not B'nai Mitzvah students have gone into the rabbinate that were students in my college classes, interestingly, are now colleagues of ours. That's, people like Lisa Silverstein-Sewer was one of my students, and Andy Vogel was one of my students. There are a bunch of Reform rabbis out there I had as students when I was teaching, when I was a TA. Yeah. So, I was at Brand. I said, all right, yeah. Well, is there something that you could share with us about finding balance in your life? Something about how congregations also can balance their expectations of a rabbi. It's a balancing act on both ends. What can you share with us? Maybe it'll be helpful both to Temple Beth Torah, but I think to Congregation Beth Emek as well.
Some of the balancing is very personal, and some of the balancing is systemic or part of the relationship. So for me personally, writing has been so important, but journal writing. I've been keeping a journal since I was 16 years old. So that's 50 years worth of journals. And the value of that is that it's a way of expressing myself and putting down my deepest thoughts and reflections. And so that's a continuity for me, a through line through my life that's been really, really helpful. My family keeps me grounded because, as we say, they keep it real. I'm not Rabbi Avi Shulman at home. I'm proudly Eve's husband and proudly my children's dad, and that's all. And believe me, I hear it from them if I try and whatever ego starts to bloom, I get cut down quickly, and that's all for the best. I want to share something that I've never made public before, but I think it's important for anyone to know. I think therapy for some, including at least for me, has been really, really helpful for balance. There are times in which I've needed a therapist, a trained professional, to talk through issues in my life that I can't resolve on my own. And nor is it reasonable to ask anyone in my family to be of service in that regard. And the personal balancing also, I'll just mention two. One being hiking and being outdoors and being in nature, and baseball. Let me just say, as long as I'm living in a city that has National League baseball, I grew up with the Dodgers, lived in Cincinnati with the Reds, the Colorado Rockies, the Houston Astros, and now the San Francisco Giants. As long as there's National League baseball, I can stay as balanced as possible.
Did you say the Giants? I mean, really?
I did. I have gladly taken on whatever town I'm living in. I am not holding on to the past. However, you've asked the question also in terms of congregations. I mean this, I've had more appreciation, not for me, but appreciation for Temple Beth Torah than at any other position I've been in my life. The notion of kavod harav, of honor, of being the rabbi and being in partnership with lay leadership, of serving a congregation that knows itself and is mature and doesn't go through a lot of drama. I am so appreciative. And also critical in any congregational rabbi's life is the relationship with the president of the congregation. And I've been fortunate and blessed to work with wonderful, wonderful presidents here at Temple Beth Torah. And I've also appreciate other leaders in our community. And also, there's been respect for me for the time that I need time off, for vacation, or for sabbatical. And those are, I've always felt that people have respected the need for personal time. So in that regard, it's been a wonderful balance for me, and I hope a model for any congregation.
I would translate kavod harav for everybody. I think that not everybody will know the Hebrew term that we're familiar with. Do you have a favorite way of translating it?
No. What would be yours?
You know, just the honor due to the rabbi.
Yeah. And that, you know, it's about, talk about a balance. It's funny, I taught a Torah study this morning, and somehow the matter arose about wearing robes. Larry, did you wear a robe at some point in your rabbinate?
Oh, this is great. My favorite answer to the question, why did you want to become a rabbi, was always because I liked the robes.
Okay.
No, I didn't wear a robe initially, but my first pulpit, the senior rabbi wore a robe for High Holy Days, and so I had to match what the senior rabbi did. As soon as I went off on my own, I ditched the robe, and I haven't. I do wear them for weddings, because I feel like I want to look neutral, but for services, I haven't done that since then.
Yeah. For me, what I shared was that, yes, similarly, I wore a robe because the senior rabbi did in Dayton, Ohio, and Temple Sinai in Denver. I wore a robe in Houston because that's what we always had done. But coming here, I shelved the robe. And the reason why I bring that up is I did it because I don't want to feel separate from others. You know, a rabbi in a congregation is in a unique position. You're both part of the community, but you're also different. And that distinction is important to maintain a certain level of leadership. And how you balance that and how different you want to be and how you're addressed and first names, rabbi this, rabbi, you know, it's a constant balancing. And I just want to affirm again, I have felt just intrinsically that balance here at Temple Beth Torah. It's never been an issue for me.
You know, specific to robes, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole about robes, but earlier you were talking about the seminal issue of transformation in Jewish life has been the place of women. And robes were godsend to women rabbis because men could get away with wearing a suit, but women on the bima wound up getting judged for what they wore. And so if you wear a robe, you remove all of that. And, you know, that I hope that we are past that by now. I don't know if that's the case, but I sure hope so. Look, I want to end with two questions because Terry just wrote in a really interesting question. I want to feed you this one, you know, a thought question, as well as Jonathan's more kind of memory question. So Terry asks, where is it? Do you believe Torah and other Jewish teachings answer all of our questions? And I'm going to combine it. The two questions don't have anything to do with one another, but I want you to be able to, well, you could strike the balance as you see fit. Jonathan asked you about your favorite memories from Temple Beth Torah.
Well, let me try and take one question first. Do I think the Torah answers all questions? I kind of want to reposition it. I look at Torah as the ultimate guide to how to live. I really do. And I quote that well-known phrase from Mishnah Avot, Hafach ba v'hafach ba dechule ba. If you turn the Torah enough times, you'll find everything within it. And in that regard, for learning of values, of how to live one's life, how to relate to people, what it means to be a Jew, how to sanctify your life, how to bring tikkun, healing to the world. All of those questions, I believe, are in Torah, broadly speaking, not the 5 books that are in our ark, but in our tradition of Torah writ large, of a guide and instruction to life. But in a different phrase, I don't look at the Torah as a scientific guide. I don't look at it as a fact book. I don't look at it as, I want to know the history of the world, I just have to turn to page. The Torah speaks about truth. That's not the same as what facts are. And I don't think that facts or science or however we define it empirically, that I look at it as an empirical guide to explaining the universe. So that's a quick answer.
Sometimes I just, you know, in talking about Torah as a fixed document, I think, well, maybe we shouldn't be relating to it as though it's done. You know, that we're part of the process. And yeah, they started writing it, but they didn't finish. And yeah, we have the first volume. We're still writing it. And so answers, well, it's up to us. And maybe that's part of the beauty of Judaism, is our continuing, our willingness to keep evolving and developing, and a faith that is never frozen in time. But speaking of frozen in time, let's go back to some of your favorite memories of your time at Temple Beth Torah.
Some of my favorite memories are our Purim spiels, because they're playful. It's great to play. It was great to have fun. It was great to feel just part of a cast. I wasn't in charge. I wasn't running the show. I didn't do the lights. I didn't do the sound. Any of you who have seen a Purim spiel at Temple Beth Torah, in the past, they were these major productions. So yeah, I have lots of fond memories, and I'm not going to single out any one of them. But I also really love dancing. I got to dance in some of those spiels. That was fun. I like to dance. That was great. I am not going to single out any life cycle moments, because, and I know it's going to sound like a cliche, but each one of them really was a joy. Each one. B'nai mitzvah. And those confirmation classes that we used to march them down to get them ready. Well, there was something satisfying about that. Teaching, for me, is part of my essence. I love to teach and to tell stories to children. Thanks, Cheryl, I see your comment. Telling stories to children or little ones at Guns in our preschool, or teaching adults in Torah study and adult ed classes. All of them kind of special moments. And again, I want to mention the dedication of our sanctuary, which was a process of much work on so many people's effort to make this place such a beautiful place to be. The creation of a legacy committee to ensure the future of the congregation is something that's a high point. Those are just some random associations that I have.
I'm glad that we got to spend these last years together as colleagues, as neighbors. It's helped to continue what was already a longstanding tradition of the relationship between our congregations. I wish you just tremendous happiness in your retirement. And before we conclude, do you have any final words that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah. Yes, I should say. Yes. First, I want to echo that, Larry. Who would have believed 42 years ago, I think, 1978, 1979. I could say that when we were climbing Jabal Musa, the Mount of Moses, maybe you leaned over to me and said, Avi, I have a prophetic vision. In 43 years, we're going to do a Shavuot service together. And I'm going to interview you before you retire. And I said, that's crazy, Larry, but you were filled with Ruach Adonai. So you had that prophetic vision. And I should have trusted you back then. More importantly, I'm glad that I will be the emeritus rabbi of Temple Beth Torah. I very much look forward to the leadership of Rabbi Zoe McCune and wish to support her in any way I can. And I will still reside in Fremont and look forward to being part not only of Temple Beth Torah, but of Beth Emek in new ways. And Larry, certainly look forward to our remaining friends and colleagues in the years ahead.
Amen to that. Thanks everybody for your great questions that Didn't all of these did not pop up in our conversation, so thank you for adding to our conversation this evening. You know, Joel Grishaver wrote that book, Be Torah. You know, on Shavuot, you're supposed to study Torah because Shavuot is the holiday of receiving the Torah, but the rabbis taught you're supposed to be Torah. So thank you for being Torah to us, Avi. And with that, I believe we can open it up for a little bit of conversation, just schmoozing. I know that we already got a chance to do that before we finish out tonight. We will close the meeting in a few minutes, but I want to make sure that if anybody's wants to chat, you do have the opportunity to do that. So feel free to unmute yourself.
That's an interesting question from Carmi.
Having my 3 children in my confirmation classes were the highlight of my rabbinate. They were superb students who challenged me at every, no, actually, Carmi knows that he was a pain in the, you know what, in my confirmation class, but he wasn't the only one in that very talented group of students. Naomi was of a quieter nature, but there were the looks that she would give me occasionally. Rebecca, being Rebecca, always kept me in my place. So there's your true to life answer. What it's like to have your own kids in your confirmation class. It's like nothing else. Please, let's all join in conversation. Feel free to unmute yourselves. I don't want to respond any further. Let's just be together as friends and community.
Yashikoa.
Thank you, Rabbi, for taking this time. Bye-bye. Both of you.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, Felix, let's say hello to your little boy there. We haven't seen him in so long.
Come here, Lee. Come.
Hello, Lee. Wow, that's a man.
Yeah, we miss having him run around the synagogue. Hey there.
Say hi to Liz.
Hello.
I know.
Today, I told them, Liz, that we were going to read the 10 Commandments, and we've been reading the Torah portions. It was the first cycle. We read them together every Saturday. And he said to me, didn't we read them sometime in February? And I looked it up, and the assigned parsha was February 6th. So he's paying attention.
Good on you. All right.
Rabbi Shulman, I don't see you, but there you are. If you hadn't become a rabbi, were you going to be, was like fireman, or was there any other career that came up as a tie for first place?
I wouldn't say a tie for first place, but following my graduation from college, from UC Santa Cruz, I took a couple years, and part of what I considered was academia, of earning a PhD and going on perhaps to a career as a teacher or a professor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I decided quite consciously that I did not want to feel isolated within the so-called ivory tower, and that my desire to be of service and connection would be best served as a rabbi. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have to say, I was really entertained by this, and I loved learning so much that I didn't know about you, in addition to what I did, and learning your prior history to coming here.
Maybe this is a good time to thank both rabbis for embracing the video technology during the pandemic. I couldn't have thought of a better way to bring everybody together during this unusual time. And I think that both congregations have done a terrific job of keeping things together for everybody.
Yeah, it's really, as much as we've missed faces within our own congregations, it's nice to see faces that we occasionally used to see. And it's great to be able to have that larger exchange and stuff with folks there. So I know I've missed it.
And Rabbi, if you ever talk San Francisco Giants baseball, I've been a fan since 1960. So I got to see Mays play, McCovey, Marichal, Gaylord Perry, all the greats. So.
And back in those days, the Giants were the enemies of my home team of the Dodgers. So
I know. I'll forgive you for that.
But I've converted, so I've moved on. So
okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious for Rabbi Milder, based on your response to his Giants passion, if you were coming out as an A's fan, because Rabbi Shulman and I have had some interesting interactions over the years with our separate love of both the American League and National League.
Well, and for those who don't know, Rabbi Milder grew up in St. Louis, so his hometown team is, of course, the Cardinals. So he's a National Leaguer, so he's fine in my book.
Rabbi, hi. I have a question. Are you looking forward to any small or large pleasures, just as a retired person after you retire?
Yeah. Thanks, Phoebe. Yeah, I look forward to being outdoors more. I really do, and thank God, of course, things are improving regarding the pandemic and that. But so the coupling of opening up again and being able to be out, I really I love being outdoors. So I look forward to more time hiking and being in nature. That's a big part, and I'm really looking forward to travel. Our daughter, Naomi, and her husband, Ryan, live in Kansas City, and our son, Carmi, and his fiancee, Cheney, live north of Seattle, and having more freedom to travel, to be near, that's a big part too. Well, it feels like a good time for us just to wish each other Chag Sameach. It is a festival, a beautiful time in Torah, and I'm glad we all can be together and celebrate this festival. And I wish everyone a very Chag Shavuot Sameach, very happy and uplifting, inspiring Shavuot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
you.
Thank
you. Back to you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you so much.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.